Okay, we are recording. We have begun. So let's open with a quick word of prayer, and then I will give a short introduction, and let's do that. Abba, Father, we thank you for the privilege of sharing your word as you reveal it to us, and we just ask that you would guide and lead everything that happens from this moment on, and that you would be blessed by it. And we say that in the name of our Messiah and give you thanks. Yahushua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen.
And, my name is Mario, for those of you that don't know me. And I'd like to introduce my brother and sister here who has really blessed me recently with sharing some of the things that have been revealed to them. I had called Charlene just a few days ago, or yeah, I think it was a few days ago, and asked her if she could help me pinpoint something down that I've been going through like every cycle, year after year, and that big question for me was when exactly is first fruits? You know, because I could read it, you know, differently, and I have read it differently several times. So anyway, she shared that with me, and then was willing to share it with our Shabbat Skype group. And so this past week, we were able to go on this journey through the scriptures from Passover and Exodus all the way to Sukkot, and including first fruits, and along the way. And so it was just a fantastic journey. And there were some people that were on the call that requested that they are not, you know, on the video publicly. So we're going to try and do a remake of what happened on Sabbath, and then be able to share that up on YouTube with whoever wants to take a look at it. So both Tim and Charlene have studied together and apart, sometimes not even knowing that they were studying the same thing, and then get together and find out that they were studying, you know, the same thing. And so this is a really going to be a special treat for those of you that haven't seen this journey before. So with that, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to mute my mic. And Charlene, if you'll go ahead and share your screen, we could get started. That would be great.
And Mario, you don't need to mute your mic, because we want you to be right there with us this whole time.
Okay.
And Tim's going to be helping with some team teaching, so it won't be just me. But I guess we're ready to get started then.
I'm ready. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Anyway, we're just going to do this teaching over again, and definitely we're very, very pleased that after all of the years of study on calendar, we found out it actually is joined to the Melchizedek priesthood. And it was that teaching of the Melchizedek priesthood that helped us to see and discover that this calendar, this feast calendar, is completely found within the Book of the Covenant Torah pages. And when I say that, perhaps everybody that knows the Melchizedek study understands, when I say Covenant Torah, I'm talking about the pages between Genesis 1 and Exodus 24:11. So this whole calendar, and not just this study alone, but every piece of the calendar study is found within those pages. So that to us means that it's a blood-ratified calendar, covenant calendar. And that also means that the requirements for this calendar are very tight. So what we're finding is that every other calendar that does not come into alignment with the covenant Torah calendar has to be a counterfeit. So it's pretty easy to spot. In one swipe, they're all gone. So let's get started with rightly dividing the word of truth for Yahweh's Book of the Covenant Calendar, which is just an exciting study. And we are calling it Yahuwah's Elegant Calendar because that's exactly what it is. It's so beautiful and simple. In fact, so easy a child can understand it and explain it. Our journey today is going to start in Exodus 12 with the Passover. We will go through to the second month and do the quail and manna incident there in Exodus 16, and then we'll finish up at Exodus 19 with Pentecost at the foot of Mount Sinai. Now, every calendar has components in it. All of them do the same thing. They will address the day, the month, and the year. But when we're looking at calendar studies, there's actually 6 components. We won't be doing them all today, but just so that you can understand that there's more than just the month. So there's the day start and the day length. There is a month start and a month length, and also the year start and the year length. How long is the year? And this is all according to the way Yahweh set it up in his creation week, not according to man's traditions, and definitely not according to pagan traditions. But today we're just kind of working with month start and the month length, and it'll cover some of the questions around that perhaps.
Okay.
So we're going to start off in Exodus chapter 12, and it is the first month of the year. This is where we have the preparation for the Egyptian deliverance, especially Passover night. Is an extremely important chapter, and everything starts right here for understanding month start when we look at some of the other studies as well. We are not going to be absolutely firm right at the beginning of the study that the dates that we have set for Passover and first fruits and the quail and the manna are absolutely correct. That's going to be up to Pentecost to show us when we get to the very end. Then we can work backwards and we'll find out if it's correct or not. And just to remember that all the calculations are on a 30-day month according to the information that's given in Genesis chapter 7 and 8 according to Noah and the flood. And you have 2 references that say 5 months and 2 references that explain that those 5 months had 150 days. So you have 2 witnesses there that the months of Yahuwah are 30-day months. There's no 31 days, and there's no 28, and there's no 29 and a half.
That's good. That makes it easy.
That finishes that right there.
I'd like to mention one thing, that 5 months in Noah's flood goes right on into the 7th month, and that will cover the 2 quarters, which is very, very important when we're thinking about the Enoch calendar.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I had that question myself, and you made that clear to me earlier. I really appreciated that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is an important point, and we have other PowerPoints that go into a lot of detail on that. But what I would like to say is that the flood account basically takes you up to approximately 2300 BC. So this calendar of Yahweh at the flood is already 1700 years old, okay? This calendar actually of the 5 months, or the 30-day months, actually goes all the way to 700 BC, to Hezekiah's event. That's where things got changed. So for basically 3,300 years after creation, this was the calendar. There was not 365 days in the year until after Hezekiah's sundial, but that's another study as well.
And
there's just lots of interest.
And there never was 364, right?
No,
That's right.
no.
Okay.
We haven't found it.
I just want to. Okay.
Not in. No, I have not found 364-day year in Covenant Torah or any of the Old Testament, any of the Tanakh. It's not, just can't find it.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's really important to know where Passover is going to be placed, because that's where we're starting our count. So in this study, for the first day of the first month, it is going to begin on a Wednesday in pagan terms. I should just mention, I will be using the pagan names Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I may use cycles, 4th cycle for Wednesday, 2nd or 3rd cycle, just so that everybody can understand. Also, there'll be a little bit of a mix between sacred name and just what you read in your King James. But we're starting off with Abib 1 on a Wednesday for this year only, for this particular Passover to Pentecost. And that selection was not pulled out of thin air. That came very, very difficult with pulling out our hair, actually. And that appointment is by Yahuwah. He's the one that tells us that that is going to be on Wednesday for Abib 1 because of the 3 days of travel. So it's kind of like a slide rule. This calendar will have to slide forward and slide back.
Yeah, and so
we're going to be
with that middle of the week prophecy that pointed to Yahusha, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, about patterns and whatnot. We'll deal with that a little bit later. But anyway, in this study, we are going to pinpoint the exact day of the week that Passover happened. We already know it was the 14th of the month, but what day was it? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what day was it? We will also pinpoint exactly where the manna week fell in the second month. That will be in Exodus 16. The calendar will also exactly point out the Pentecost date. Was it the 3rd of the 3rd month, or the 4th, or the 15th? It'll actually tell us exactly what day Pentecost was at Mount Sinai. And because we have to do the 50-day Omer count to get there, when we get to the Pentecost date, then we can work backwards to first fruits back in Exodus 12 to find out the exact day and the date of first fruits in the first month. So it's a puzzle. It's a riddle. It's lots of fun.
Yes. Yeah.
There are spiritual clues to discover timing, and there are also hermeneutic principles. One of the hermeneutic principles, or a rule of Bible study, and this one is really important, Yahuwah does not repeat things of no great consequence. So if something is just repeated once and it's like, okay, you know, got the point. But if things are repeated more than once, it's something really important for us to ears up. It's a red flag. He's trying to get your attention for something. So here's a perfect example with Pharaoh's dream. When he had the dream of 7 cows, 7 were fat, 7 were skinny. And then he had another dream with 7 heads of grain. 7 were nice and plump, and some were thin and all shriveled up. This was in Genesis 41. You can read it in verses 17 to 31. And remember that Joseph told the Pharaoh, oh, I know what the dream means. It means there's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there's 7 years of famine, so you better get ready. But this is where you find this principle of things that are repeated that are important to remember. It's in Genesis 41:32. And I would mark this in your Bible because I need to mark it to find it. But this is where this hermeneutic principle is found. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice because it is a thing that is established by Yahweh. And Yahweh will shortly bring it to pass. So you will find other places in the scriptures where things are being repeated twice. That means they're important, and to listen up. When there is something that is repeated more than twice, then really listen up. As in the case with Hezekiah, his story of the sundial event is recorded 3 times in the scripture. It is the only story in the whole Old Testament that is given 3 times. And I know when I read that, my Bible through for the very first time in 2000, I noticed that right away, and I thought, how come that story is there 3 times? But I didn't find out about calendar studies for 10 years after that. So here's the question. If a command that is repeated twice is important, what about a command that is repeated 3 times? Would that be more important? Would that be something that you would say, yeah, maybe I should take a look at? Well, let's take a look.
I would think so.
I would think so, and especially in this study, because there is a command that is given 3 times by Yahuwah, and it is important.
Yeah, this is
in preparation.
really exciting what you're about to share here. I didn't catch it, and I've been looking at it for 13 years, and I didn't see that as a command until you brought this teaching out. This is really great.
We spent quite a long time struggling to get this study perfected so that everything lined up. And I remember sending this study out one time. I thought I had a bunch of it correct. And a friend in Colorado sent me back to me, and he says, Tim, he says, you've got this all wrong. He says, you've got to consider the commands to travel 3 days. He says, without that, you have nothing. So I went back and I plugged the 3 days in, the 3 days travel. Everything fell together. Just could not believe it. I was astounded. That's how vital this 3 days travel is.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is all because we wanted, Tim and I wanted, to have Passover on a Wednesday because we firmly believe in patterns in the Bible, and we know that Yahusha was crucified on a Wednesday according to Daniel 9:27 prophecy in the midst of the week. And so we just said, well, this has to be a pattern. And it just wasn't working, was it, Tim?
Nope.
until he got the message. And then one day he called me and he said, Charlene, it's not right. Passover was not on Wednesday. And I sort of complained and muttered a little bit. And I didn't really like that. But that's the way it happens. You have to take the bumps and the bruises, right?
You know,
but when we actually discovered where Passover really was, and it wasn't on a Wednesday, then we realized something else that was even better. And that is that Yahuwah was saying to us, you know what, your Passover can be on any day of the week, because the Joshua Passover, as we found out, was on a weekly Sabbath. And he's saying your Passover can be on any day of the week. But when it comes to my son, his Passover is going to be on the midst of the week, the middle day of the week. That is how you're going to know that he's the true Messiah. And then then we were rejoicing. It's like, yahoo, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to point out something there too, because that goes along with the fact is that any day could be a day of deliverance for someone who comes to Mashiach. That's important. And what else is really coming to light is that oftentimes in the past, people want to make something fit in their agenda, in their mind. And until you're willing to break loose of that idea that it has to be on this day or it has to be this way, or, you know, it's, if you guys weren't willing to do that, we might not ever come to this conclusion.
That's absolutely right. So it's fun. It's a journey, and sometimes you have to leave your own belief system behind. But anyway, we've got 50 slides to do, so we better move along.
Okay.
Let's look at these commands, and we'll be coming back to them for a review. And you will find a lot of review in the PowerPoints, because that's how you're going to learn and remember. So the first command is given in Exodus 3:18. Yahuwah is telling Moses, he's saying unto Moses, you are going to say unto him, that's Pharaoh, the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us, and now let us go, we beseech thee, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, and here's the reason why, that we may sacrifice to Yahuwah our Elohim. That's the first time. The second command is given in Exodus chapter 5, verse 3. And this is Moses now speaking to Pharaoh. And they said, Moses and Aaron together, remember Aaron was the voice for Moses, the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey into the desert and sacrifice unto Yahuwah our Elohim. And now here's their reason why. Lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. Moses and Aaron knew that if they didn't obey Yahuwah, there was going to be a consequence to pay, and they didn't want to meet up with a consequence. So they were choosing to be obedient. The third command is found in Exodus chapter 8, verse 27. And here is Moses. He has a reminder to Pharaoh. He's telling him, we will go. He's not asking him anymore. He's saying, we will go. 3 days' journey into the wilderness, and sacrifice to Yahuwah our Elohim as he shall command us. So I want you to remember the three commands are in Exodus chapter 3, chapter 5, and chapter 8. 3 different places. There was no reason for the Pharaoh to not understand this. Yahuwah's command was very specific. Tim, do you want to go ahead and do this slide?
Yahuwah fully intended a minimum of 3 cycles of travel for the Hebrew nation before they were required to safely sacrifice to him. This point is extremely crucial to recognize. But Pharaoh suggested another option.
Pharaoh didn't really like that idea too much. And we read in chapter
No.
8, verse 25, that he called for Moses and Aaron, and he said, I'll give you a chance here, Tim, in a second. He said, you go slaughter to your Elohim in the land. What did that mean, Tim?
That means in the danger. They were, if they slaughtered the cattle, which is the abomination of the Mitzrites, then the Mitzrite people could come and attack them in the land. They were in there in advantage to attack them. It's danger.
And did the Mitzrite like worship these what they were going to be slaughtering? Do you know anything
Yes.
about that?
Yeah.
Yes, in Egypt,
the cows are considered holy to them, and when someone starts slaughtering what you consider holy, I think tensions can get pretty tight.
So, holy cow!
Yeah.
and that's what it says in Exodus 8, verse 26. Moses is answering the Pharaoh, and he's telling him right out, it is not right for us to do so. That would be to sacrifice in the land of Egypt, for we would be slaughtering the abomination of the Egyptians to Yahuwah our Elohim. See, if we slaughter the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, are they not going to stone us? So those were the consequences. Moses knew there was consequences for disobeying Yahuwah, and he knew if they stayed in the land there was consequences with the Egyptians. So there was no other choice but to be obedient. He says again, we've had this already, let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we shall slaughter to Yahuwah our Elohim. And he said, as he commands us. Moses is telling the Pharaoh, it's not what you have to say, it's what our Elohim is telling us. We are doing what he is asking us to do. So the 3-day command, it was absolute. There was no wiggle room. You can't get out of it. Why? Because the sacrificing of sacred Egyptian animals in the land would be a serious offense to them, because you were slaughtering their gods. They worshiped these animals as their gods. They had many gods, and this was some of them. Yahuwah knew that Israel would need 3 days of travel, or 3 cycles, before sacrificing to eliminate these additional problems, because he knows the end from the beginning. But it was only under high stress through that death angel that Pharaoh finally accepted this reason, but only after he lost his son, and all the firstborn of Egypt also died that night at midnight. And what did Pharaoh do? He asked them to get out of the land. In fact, he said, you better get out quick, and I don't want to see your face ever again. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the next important consideration that we're coming up to, and I think I'm going to just turn this over to Tim and let him do this whole slide.
The next important consideration. In order to have 3 cycles of travel into the wilderness without violating the weekly Sabbath, it is impossible for Passover to land on cycles 4 to 7, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sabbath. The following scriptural evidence will show beyond any doubt that Passover of Moses was celebrated on Tuesday, with departure on Wednesday morning. How can we know for sure? By the placement of, number 1, the day of departure, 2, the 3 days of travel, 3, the time of crossing the Red Sea, 4, determining which day is the weekly Sabbath, 5, the placement of first fruits for the purpose of, number 6, the 50th day Omer count to Pentecost.
Okay.
So we have 6 witnesses here that are going to give us perfect scriptural alignment. Let's look for it.
And when you say 3 cycles of travel, you're saying 3 days of travel. Is that right?
Yes, yes. There's sometimes people get confused when you say the word day, and they expect that you just mean the light season when there's light in the sky. And so that is why we say cycles, because that designates a 24-hour period, and there's no confusion. That's the reason why we use the word cycle.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So when you see or hear the word cycle, it's talking about a 24-hour slot of time, not 12 hours or just the light season.
Yes.
Got it.
So we're going to start our journey in month number 1, Abib. You can see that we have placed the first day of the year right there on Wednesday. If you count 10 days, you will have the 10th on the preparation day, Friday, where they were to choose a lamb to have in their homes for 4 days to be the sacrificial lamb. That will place the 14th or Passover on a Tuesday. There's no other way around it. I have also heard some say that the calendar has to start on a Wednesday and Passover has to be on a Wednesday. It won't work. There's no way that if the first day of the year is a Wednesday, Passover will never, ever be on a Wednesday. But I've seen that even in Book of Enoch, I've seen that. So this is the template that we're going to be using for this calendar study. We'll start here with the 14th in Exodus 12:2 is the command, and you shall keep it, this is the Passover lamb, until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings, and they shall eat the flesh on that night, that's the night of Passover, roasted in fire with the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs. And then in Exodus 12:22, the command is given, none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. That is going to be the morning of the 15th. In Numbers 33:3, it tells us that they departed from Ramses on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. The children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. You can't get it clearer than that. So they were told to stay at their homes all night long on the 14th. That was Passover night. They were allowed to eat the flesh of that Passover lamb all night long, but before the morning, that Passover lamb had to be burnt and out of sight if they hadn't consumed it all before the morning, before the day exchange. That's why the day starts in the morning with the twilight, not with sunrise. So Numbers 33 tells you they left on the 15th day. That's going to be the first Sabbath of unleavened bread.
Well,
and it also says on the morrow after. Let's just take a look at the definition for morrow or morning. It's 1242. It's boker. And the very first definition is properly from 1239, but properly is dawn, as the break of day. And I have found that a lot of people don't know that dawn is before sunrise. So that's why this is in here. Where we live, we'll have a dawn twilight for many hours in the summertime before the sun even rises above the horizon. Okay, so we're leaving on the 15th day of the first month. And then we have to have 3 days of journey before we even begin to think about crossing the Red Sea. So this is the report that we have in Exodus 12:37. The children of Israel set out from Ramses to Sukkot. It's also in Numbers 33:3. On the second day, they departed from Sukkot and camped at Etham in Numbers 33:6 as well. And then we have a third day. We're talking about each day as a 24-hour cycle. On the 17th of the month, they were to turn and camp before Pi Hahiroth between Migdal and the sea. I think we need to do a little bit more study in this area, but for right now, this will be fine for you. So this is now going to bring us all the way through the light season of Friday, and we're right up to the night of where the night is going to begin on the preparation night, and that's going to be picked up a little bit more with more information later. But I would like you to notice that the Hebrew nation has now traveled through the third light season on Abib 17 with the intent that they're going to camp here at Pi Hahiroth. But there is something brewing in the background that the scriptures tell us about. Yes, they did have a promise of deliverance from the Egyptians, but once the Egyptians, or Pharaoh, had figured out, hey, they got away on us, he decided that he was going to chase too. So in Exodus 14:9, it says, "And the Egyptians pursued them, and all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and they overtook them camping by the sea beside Pi Hahiroth." And that would be on Friday, or the preparation day of Abib 17. I'm sure the people were frightened, but Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the deliverance of Yahuwah, which he does for you today." This is already into the night season, okay? We're still on Abib 17. And then he says something really, really great. "For the Egyptians who you see today, on Friday the 17th, you are never, never to see again." We know that there's still a lot of people that understand or believe that the day begins at sunset, but does it really? So here are some questions that I just want to ponder and have you internalize here for a little bit. When will the salvation of Yahuwah occur? Will salvation be realized before the sunset of Abib 17? Or will Israel's experience of salvation today actually be realized at the break of dawn, which is the true ending of the today, the 17th of the first month? And even more important, will the scriptures tell us exactly what day Israel was delivered, so there's absolutely no misunderstanding? And another question, is Yahuwah's calendar that precise? That's what we want to find out. So keep those questions in mind as we go through the study.
So if we're seeing this right, when it says that the true ending of the day, the true ending of the day would also be the beginning of the next, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, isn't that usually how it works? The end of one begins on the next day. Yeah. And
Well,
I also wanted to make note too that this is a mixed multitude that is here now, because it was a mixed multitude that left, right? It was the whole house of Jacob and everybody that decided to go with him, right?
yes, that's right. They came down to Egypt hundreds of years before as a family of 72, I think it was. But when they're leaving Egypt, there's very many more than 72. Plus we have the great multitude from Egypt, and they estimate at least 2 million people left Egypt that night.
Yeah,
so probably the majority of them were actually the Egyptians. And it's also interesting to note, when you're reading this account in the Exodus story, that Moses is talking to Israel. He doesn't address the pagan Egyptians. Everything that I have found, he's addressing Israel and their problems. He doesn't ever say anything about the great multitude. They were pagans. They were learning about who this Yahuwah was. So they weren't as responsible as Israel was.
Yeah.
So we're getting ready to cross the Red Sea. We've done our 3 days of journey. We're here at the night where we're going to break through. The next phase of this journey begins with the Friday night season on the 3rd day of travel. They traveled all day in the daylight, and they're trying to get out of Egypt, and they are now ready to cross the Red Sea. The sea has been parted. The ground is there. They start going across. And this crossing took the night season of Abib 17, ending just before dawn of the 7th day Sabbath. And you're right, Mario, where the day ends is where the next day begins. And that's a rule of calendar. When you get to the last day of December 31 on the Roman calendar, the next day is the first day of the new year. That's always the way it is. That's a rule of calendar. So right there, where that star is, that's where they were crossing.
So they didn't get much.
Crossing the Red Sea during the night.
Yeah, if you look at it closely, they were traveling all through the light season of the 3rd day, or Friday. All the animals were traveling, all the children were traveling, everything they had were traveling. They thought they were going to camp. They set up beside the sea, and then they had to travel all night. So people have tried to say that, no, they were traveling on the next day and it couldn't be a Sabbath. But they were resting. Those animals and the people had all traveled 24 hours. They were tired.
Yeah.
They needed a rest. What better day for a rest is there than Shabbat? Yahuwah had this planned out fully.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
He always does plan out fully, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim, do you want to read the scripture and what's coming up, because this is the most exciting part?
Number 10, crossing the Red Sea during the night season of Abib 17. Box 11, Exodus 14, 26, 27, and 30. Yahuwah said, "Stretch out your hand over the sea and let the waters come back on the chariots and the horsemen." And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its usual flow at the break of day on Abib 18, with the Egyptians fleeing into it. Thus Yahuwah overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Thus Yahuwah saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. That day is looking back on the past 24 hours that started at dawn, where they traveled up to the sea. They started to camp. Then they traveled through the night season, through the Red Sea. The Egyptians were destroyed at dawn, and it tells us, again, thus Yahuwah saved Israel that day from the Egyptians. There's your dawn to dawn, 24 hours.
That's great.
Therefore, break of day is where the new day begins. This was the moment of deliverance. The scriptures do not say the new day began with sunsets. Very profound.
Really clear. So we have also found that there are patterns in scriptures, and they're abundant, and we also found that you can usually trust these patterns. Patterns repeat themselves. We also hear all the time history repeats itself. Well, that's because Yahusha has put that pattern into place. That's how we can understand prophecy, because patterns in the past have repeated themselves. So that's why we were looking for Yahusha having Passover on a Wednesday in this particular study. And there are many that believe that Messiah was died on a Friday cross, not a Wednesday. And they also believe that this is supported with the Friday Passover in Exodus 12. I haven't seen anybody prove it, but that's what they believe. And they believe this because it seems to stem from a pattern. And we believe the same thing. So is there any possible way that the Exodus 12 Passover could have been on a Friday? Let's examine the evidence just one more time. We're just going to take a look again. We already know that we had to have 3 days journey in order to get to the Sabbath. So if you have a Wednesday Passover, you cannot have 3 days journey and not violate the Sabbath. If you have a Friday Passover, you definitely do not have anywhere for a 3 days journey. It is absolutely impossible. It does not work. So the Sabbath is telling you, it's also a marker of where these days have to be. It's also really exciting to me that their deliverance was during the night, all night long on Friday. Now, we have also heard that when we used to believe in sunset, that you wouldn't be traveling on the Sabbath. Those are Sabbath hours, and you shouldn't be traveling. You shouldn't be doing this, and you shouldn't be doing that. There was 2 million people crossing the Red Sea on the night season of that Friday day.
Yeah.
And they got across.
Yeah.
And just as the dawn was coming, Moses put out his rod, and the Red Sea came back upon itself. Really exciting. So the Sabbath day was honored.
This is really good in as much as that, oftentimes when we read narratives, we look at the story and we miss some of the languages being used. I, for the longest time, did not look at this account as having any relation to how to confirm our calendar. I saw it as salvation. I saw it as us, leaving bondage. I saw us, as crossing over into covenant or a new life, but never really paid attention to the calendar language that is all through this teaching.
Absolutely, and I know Tim is going to agree with me. When you start doing calendar studies, you will pay attention to every single detail. You won't leave out anything, because calendar language includes every detail. And we did the same thing. We were lazy, sloppy readers before. Just like, oh yeah, learned that story when I was like 4 years old. I know it, right?
Right.
You start doing calendar, you end up paying attention to every single detail. So Exodus 15 as well has a lot of detail. We're just going to do a short review here on chapter 15. This is the song of Moses and the song of his sister Miriam. The Red Sea crossing was all night with Yahuwah's bright cloud guiding the way. It must have been very exciting. Their deliverance from the Egyptians was just before dawn. That would have been very exciting. And is there any wonder that Exodus 15 records the song of Moses and the song of Miriam right here? Abib 18, they're on the other side of the Red Sea, and not only that, it was the weekly seventh-day Sabbath. They had the chance to rest.
And
Not only that, it was a day of praise and worship.
yeah.
Exodus 15:20 records that all the women went after Miriam with timbrels, and they were dancing. And Tim came up with this. Do you think the people were traveling on that Sabbath? Absolutely not. Not when all the ladies are celebrating this miracle of deliverance and salvation and they're dancing. Nobody is going anywhere.
It's
were-
funny that it's mentioned that
I don't think the men even broke camp.
I would think that it's not just the ladies that were celebrating this too. I think all the fellows are right up there with them.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
Anyway, it was quite an experience, and let's not forget that when we cross over from the bondage of this earth into the heavenly Canaan, we are going to be doing the same thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I do believe it will be on Sabbath. So we're coming up now to Exodus 16. This is the second month, and this is the month where the quail end up arriving, and we have the first recording of the manna week. I don't want you to forget that we still have not established with clarity the timing of Passover in the month of Abib as being on a Tuesday. We haven't done it yet. We're just suggesting that to you. But Exodus 16 has the next timing clue. In the second month, we are still counting the Omer. we're looking for 7 completed weeks before the Pentecost. That was a command. And next, there is an investigation of the exact day and the exact date for the arrival of the quail and the manna in the 2nd month. So we want to know which day it was, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and what was the date. Was it the 7th, 8th, or the 9th? We want to know that. Exodus 16:1 makes a declaration. It says that Israel entered the wilderness of Sin on the 15th day of the 2nd month. This is calendar language. Once you understand calendar language, you're going to see it all over the scriptures. It's just everywhere. So when we count 30 days from Wednesday, Abib 15, we can pinpoint with exactness exactly which day they arrived in the wilderness of Sin. And remember, we're still implementing this assumption. And also remember, there's no traveling on the 7th-day Sabbath ever that we could find. So there's Abib 1. Don't forget, there's our Passover day, our 3 days journey. That's where they crossed the Red Sea. Here is Sabbath. We're saying that this should be first fruits. 30-day count from Abib 15 to the 2nd month, Ziph 15. They left Egypt on the 15th day of the month. And if you go to the 30th, you have 15 days. And this was a counting lesson for us. I don't know if Tim remembers how much headache I gave him over this. I will just tell you what he told me.
Yeah.
This day that they journeyed on the 15th day, that day is not counted as a 24-hour travel journey until you get past it. When you get to the 16th, that is where they have traveled 1 day. And that's going to be a brain bender. But that's where you start counting on the 16th. At the dawn of the 16th is where they had traveled 1 day. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 days of travel. You're going to have to think on that one for a little bit. You have to learn to count with calendar.
Could I ask you to elaborate on something there too? You had said that first fruits would have been on that next Sunday. When you say it would have been, you're meaning that it would have been if
we are still making an assumption, okay? This is still an assumption because it has not been proven yet with the scriptures. So from our study, we understand that first fruits has to follow this weekly Sabbath. So there's your weekly Sabbath, so first fruits has to be here. But this is still an assumption at this point in time. We've got 30 more slides to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
that helps.
Okay. So I just want you to note right here, I've changed this calendar a little bit. I have added an extra column right here for the 2nd month to show you the Omer weeks. Okay, so don't be confused. This is not a weekday. This is just to show you the counting of the Omer because we need to have 7 completed weeks. In Exodus 16:1, we have calendar clues. They took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came onto, or they traveled into, the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month, after their departing out of the land of Egypt. So they came in on this day. They were traveling all that day. We'll go to the next slide. Don't forget, this is just your review here for your Omer count. So they traveled all day on Ziph 15, right here, to enter the wilderness of Sin. This is not the wilderness of Sinai. This is the wilderness of Sin. They were not murmuring all that day. However, that all changed by the next day, Sabbath, on the 16th, the day that they had stopped to assemble for worship. They were stopped for their Sabbath rest, and there was time to complain, and that's exactly what they did. While they're moving, they were not going to get Moses' attention for anything. And remember, there's 2 million of them. And in Exodus 16:2, it says, the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And this is for the Egypt's flesh pots. Do you notice it says that the congregation of the children of Israel doesn't say anything about the Egyptians?
Mario?
So what was all the murmur?
Yes, yes.
Can you back up there, Charlene?
I sure can.
Mario, do you remember Charlene was just telling us that we have learned to be to pay attention to details and each little word? When we go to Exodus 16:2 in the right-hand side there, and it says the whole congregation. How many times, Charlene, did we read over that and not clue in that they were congregating? They couldn't. The people couldn't murmur in a when they were traveling, when there was 2 million of them. But this is the Sabbath day. They were congregating. They were stopped. This is the only way that they could murmur. And I read this so many times, and just it went over my head. Finally, one day I clued in.
Very good.
Absolutely. In fact, this chapter in the Quail study paper for Exodus 16, what Tim and I had to do with this chapter was actually start with verse 1 and go through every single verse to figure out what day it was in every single verse, so that we could understand when the quail were arriving. It was that tricky. And so in the paper, we actually go through every single verse by verse, paying very close attention to every word in the verse. It's just something you have to do with the calendar study. So we learned it all the hard way. Are we ready?
Yep. Yep.
Well, what was all the murmuring about? Clearly, the complaining has something to do with the flesh pots. And this term appears only one time in the Scriptures. I found that interesting, just once, not 2 or 3, just once. And the children of Israel, in verse 3, said unto Moses and Aaron, would to Yahuwah that we had died by the hand of Yahuwah in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full, for you have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. They were not very happy. I want to go home, back to bondage. But the question is, what were they murmuring for? Because they had flesh in the form of clean meats all around them in the herds of their livestock, including bulls, oxen, heifers, goats, and lambs. Could they not have helped themselves at any time? Well, the answer is absolutely not.
There was no Starbucks.
Why?
There was no Starbucks.
No Starbucks. Why cannot they just go help themselves? Well, let's take a look. There are qualifications for sacrificial animals that are given later on in the Levitical laws, but we believe that Yahweh does not change, and he doesn't tell a lie, and he doesn't say, well, it's this way today and that way tomorrow. That this was a concept, a principle. The life of the Hebrew people revolved somewhat around the sacrifices. So every man, without exception, was responsible to be the priest for the entire family and to bring those sacrifices to the individual family altar. Remember, there's no sanctuary at this point in time. So later on in the Levitical laws, if a family desired to have flesh for a meal. They were required to offer the animal at the tabernacle as a sacrifice to Elohim, and that was the primary step before eating this meat. It was called a thank offering or a peace offering, and there's another name for it as well. But it was, if you wanted to have some lamb on your table that night, you had to offer it as a peace offering or a thank offering. Portions of it were burnt on the altar, but the rest of the meat was taken home. And they could eat on it for 2 days, and on the third day they had to dispose of it, of course, for sanitary reasons and health issues. So clearly, every meal of flesh was a type of sacrifice of some sort. You were not allowed, if it was a sacrificial animal, to just go out and get it, kill it, take it home, and eat it. It had to be given as a sacrifice first. So here's the question. Would this mean that the sacrificial animals before the Exodus would have been offered first at the individual family altar before partaking of it for dinner table food? That is an important question in this study. Is this a requirement of covenant, of the law of the altar? I'm just asking some questions for you to think about. Here's another question. Would the sacrifices that Abraham prepared in Genesis 15 be a clue? So here is the law for using a sacrificial animal as food. It is given in Leviticus 17. What man soever there be of the house of Israel that kills an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or that kills it out of the camp, and if he does not bring it onto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation to offer an offering unto the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, here's what happens. Blood shall be imputed unto that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. So that is telling us that if they just go out and take a sacrificial animal and kill it, that's like committing murder. Basically, that's what it is. And blood is going to be imputed onto that man. That's how serious this is. And the priest then shall sprinkle the blood upon the altar of the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and he burns the fat for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And then the flesh is given to the family to take home and enjoy with their friends. It was a feast. So the specific sacrificial animals mentioned are the ox, the lamb, or the goat. Could it be that these specific sacrificial animals were not considered the flesh pots of Egypt? Because these people were clamoring for the flesh pots of Egypt. So the question is, was Israel clamoring for quail as the flesh pots of Egypt? So maybe we should find out. Here's a few facts about quail that you might not know. The quail is known for its very tender, juicy meat. It's delicate to the desires of the taste buds. I hear this from a lot of people. I've never had any myself. Delicious. But the spring was also the time of the year that quail migrate north in large numbers. Now, don't forget, we are in the spring of the year when they are on their trek. Due to their very large, long and large migration paths and being a heavy bird, they tire easily, and so they'll fly low to the ground, and they can be easily caught. They also fly in large groups, sort of like locusts, and they bed down for the night just before sundown, resting in groups of about 75 or more for safety. The quail delicacies were an Egyptian treat in the spring of the year. They were easy to catch, and they were easily preserved by drying in the hot sun. So they could have taken these quail with them. Could this information fit the context of flesh pots? Quail are not mentioned as one of the listed sacrificial animals that would first have to be offered as a sacrifice before partaking of it.
On the other night when we did the study, someone brought in about cooking the quail in an earthenware pot, or something like that. And I don't remember the details, but when the quail was cooked, then they broke the earthenware pot, and then you ate your quail. And I think I didn't get a chance to look this up, but I feel it's really, really important. I need to look this up and search it out, because I think that will give us a very direct connection to the flesh pots.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting as well. And there's something else that came to mind too, understanding that this is all before Leviticus, but those, even though they were Israel and they were in that culture, may have even looked at some of those animals as being those Egyptian type, what they would.
Yes, I hear you, Mario. If they had to go 3 days to sacrifice their sacrifices unto Yahuwah, to not offend the Egyptians, yes, you're making a really important point. They wouldn't have just taken them and sacrificed them in front of the Egyptians that came out with them. But I'm also hoping that by this time, there's no record of it, that the Egyptians that came out were starting to understand that this Elohim that was leading out the Israelites was a very, very strong and powerful Elohim. There's no information about the great multitude that came out. We always just hear about Israel. So
anyway, okay, it just popped in my mind. It hadn't popped into my mind before, but it popped in my mind now. So. Okay.
All kinds of questions are going to pop into your mind.
Yeah.
So don't forget that I have this column here that's counting the omer. So let's look and see where the quail show up. First, we have a question. The people are murmuring, and what is Yahuwah supposed to do with all this complaining? It tells us in Exodus 16:12, he says to Moses, I have heard the grumblings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, between the evenings you are to eat meat, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. He could not get their attention with anything, and he said, okay, I have to satisfy their hunger before they're going to listen to another thing I say. And Yahuwah sends the quail. It says between the evenings. We will not go into that phrase right here, but definitely evening is a time of the 24-hour cycle that has light in the sky. So it isn't dark yet. That means that we have not come to the Sabbath night, and we definitely have not reached the first day.
Yeah. And like you had
it says
it's a time that the quail would fly low as well.
In the evening, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They didn't come in at night. They wouldn't come in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. So when it was getting sundown and it was evening, that's when they started coming in to bed down for the night. Absolutely. And they were coming in large groves. So in Exodus 13, the first part of the verse, this is what it says. We are still on, we didn't do all the verses, but we are still on Sabbath, the 16th of the second month. That's where we are. And it came to be that the quails came up at evening and they covered the camp. We're still on the light season of the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath day. So the quail arrive to satisfy the flesh pot desires of the people. Arrival of the quail would be typical for this time of the year. Yes, Tim?
Can I address the quail arriving on Sabbath? Because I do believe there's going to be people questioning why the quails were allowed to arrive on a Sabbath and why the people were allowed to eat quail on the Sabbath. And from what I understand, from what I have studied, the manna was to arrive as a test to the people. That there were 6 days to gather the manna, and the seventh day was the Sabbath of rest, for which there was to be no gathering of food. This was the test for the people. So this test had not arrived yet. These people coming out of Mitzrayim, for all intents and purposes, had lost their understanding of the Sabbath and what was supposed to happen on the Sabbath. So Yahuwah said that this next week with the manna was going to be a test. It hadn't arrived yet. So these people that were eating the quail on Sabbath night, they hadn't received this test from Yahuwah yet, so they could not fail. So it was at this point, it was overlooked and passed by that they could eat the quail on Sabbath because the test had not come yet.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
So, Tim, I'm just going to let you continue on because it's going to point that out on the slides. Mario, did you have a comment?
No, I was just saying that's a good point.
You want me to continue reading the slide?
Yes, go ahead.
The quail arrived to satisfy the flesh-pot desires of the people. Arrival of the quail would be typical for this time of year. The quail arrive on Sabbath Ziph 16 and are devoured the same day. How do we reconcile the fact that quail arrived on Sabbath and the people are promised they will eat them before the Sabbath day ends at dawn the next day? Is this a violation of the weekly Sabbath?
Well, like you
If I'd have waited one more slide, it would have been good, eh?
like you just said too, that the breakdown of what should be done wasn't given to them at that point, right?
Yeah. Like most other fowl, quail typically bed down for the night just shortly before sundown. They usually do not roost, but will huddle together in large groups of 75 other quail for protection. Or more. Feeding times are normally early in the morning and evening. It is very reasonable to understand the arrival of the quail in the evening hours of the day. Flying low, they would be easy to catch. It is also obvious there was work involved to catch, kill, and cook the quail on the Sabbath hours that did not end till the dawn of the next day. Did Yahuwah tempt his people or just answer their charge, that it was his responsibility to take care of them, even if it was to fulfill their sinful desires they had been clamoring for? Often Yahuwah gives us what we ask for, even when it is not best for us. It's quite obvious these rebellious people were working on the Sabbath, caring little about the holiness of the Sabbath. The passage is clear on identifying this problem is with Israel, not the great multitude of the Egyptians. This was the reason why Yahuwah had to implement the week of manna structure. The majority simply did not know the proper way to observe the Sabbath anymore. Yes.
Was quail preparation a violation of Sabbath? Let's read the following verse first. In Exodus 16:23, and he, this is Moses, said unto them, This is that which the Lord hath said, Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seethe that ye will seethe, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. These are very strict commands from Moses for Sabbath observance regarding food preparation. In fact, it was absolutely no cooking and no baking on the Sabbath day. The complete Sabbath day cycle is from Sabbath dawn to the break of dawn on the first day. However, the quails were available for cooking during the light season, included in the Sabbath evening hours. According to the instructions that we just read at the top, doesn't it appear like Israel was in violation of dishonoring the Sabbath with the quail preparations? However, this is what we have to remember. The context of this verse is 6 days after the quail, given on the 22nd month of Ziph. The quail had arrived on the 16th. So the question now is this. Even if some of Israel knew about these Sabbath requirements, would Yahuwah hold all of them responsible for complete Sabbath observance when his full instructions had not been given yet? Or would he wink at their ignorance this time? This is something that we thought about. Would he just wink at it? Because we do have a scripture that says he winks at ignorance. And we believe that no, Yahuwah did not wink. And the reason is because he had not given them full instructions yet. So they were not in violation of anything. He didn't hold them accountable until they had the instructions. So I'd just like you to note, as we continue on our journey, we have now completed the 4th complete week of the Omer count. Right here, they came into the wilderness of Sin, right there on the 15th, and they were stopped and congregated for the Sabbath on the 16th. They begged for the flesh pots that came Sabbath night after sundown, and at the end of Sabbath, we've completed our 4th week of the Omer count.
Yeah, I wanted to.
So now we're going
to also point out too that to me it seemed clear as to the Sabbath starting in the morning, because had they kept it overnight, it would stink. It would become rancid any other night, other than that preparation day.
That's right. We're going to look at that in detail.
You're noticing that the quail didn't go rancid at sunset.
Right.
Okay, we're going to look at the manna week now. This is where it gets to be fun. We're starting the 5th week of the Omer count. Right here, on the first day of the week, in Exodus 16:12, Yahuwah, this is before this happened. This is last week that this happened, the week before, where Moses is given the instructions from Yahuwah, because he said, in the morning you will be satisfied with bread. That was after they had the quail. Then in Exodus 16:13, we're going to read the last half of the verse. The first half of the verse said that the quail came in the evening, and the last half of verse 13 says, in the morning, that would have been Sunday the 17th, the dew lay all around the camp. In verse 15, Moses said to them, it is the bread, or manna, which Yahuwah has given you to eat. In verse 21, and they gathered it every morning. This from the 17th to the 21st, which would be Sunday to Thursday. They gathered it every morning. But on the 6th day, there was another command. In verse 22, it says, on the 6th day, which would have been the 22nd, they gathered twice as much bread. And then we get this command in Exodus 16:23 about what happens on the Sabbath. We'll read it again. And he said to them, this is what Yahuwah has said. Tomorrow, which is the Sabbath, is a rest. It is a Sabbath set apart to Yahuwah. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook. And lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep it until the morning. So from the first day of the week to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they gathered every single morning. That was the command, as much as you want, and it's not going to keep until the next day, so get enough. And then on Friday, the 22nd, the command was to gather twice as much because you're going to need it for Sabbath, and it will not stink.
No stinking.
No stinking. The importance of the first manna week is really, really interesting. Remember, we're still in the assumption that Passover was on a Tuesday. When you count from a Tuesday Passover of Abib 14, the scriptural timing places the first arrival of the manna on the morning of the first day of the week, down here on the 17th. This establishes the pattern of work 6 days and rest the 7th. So the manna has to be on the first day of the week, because here's the pattern. You gather 6 days, no gathering on the 7th. That's following the pattern of the creation week. But here's the question. What would happen with a Wednesday or a Friday Passover in the month of Abib? If you had a Wednesday Passover, the first arrival of the manna is going to end up here. I didn't put the slides in to show you. You can do this yourself on a calendar. But if you have a Wednesday Passover, your manna shows up on the second day of the week, the second cycle. If you have a Friday Passover in month number 1, the first day that the manna arrives is on the middle day of the week. Therefore, neither option can establish the pattern for the creation week. There's no way that you can gather 6 days of manna starting on a Monday or a Wednesday and then keep the 7th. So right here, it's already showing us that a Wednesday Passover or a Friday Passover will not work with this calendar, because we're looking at patterns now.
Some people will try and tell me that it's okay to start on a Monday, or it's okay to start on a Tuesday to start the manna week. But I'm going to take you back to Exodus 16:4. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, "See, I am raining bread from the Shemayim for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day in order," try this again, "in order to try them, whether they walk in my Torah or not." See, that's right there where Yahuwah explicitly declares it's a test. So if Yahuwah is going to give these people a test, how can he give them an incomplete week of picking manna and then judge them on that incomplete week? He would not do that. The manna week has to start on the first cycle of the week, and has to have, as you said, Charlene, it has to have 6 cycles of picking manna and then the 7th day Sabbath rest. That is the test, and it cannot be any other way, for it to be complete.
Those are all really, really good points. Excellent. So here's a little review, because we're completing section number 2, and a few of the high points for the second month to demonstrate the perfect manna week, not an imperfect or incomplete one. Manna fell for the first time on the first day of the week because there had to be 6 days of gathering completed before the Sabbath, and that establishes your pattern in the creation week. So I'm going to give you a review of this information on the 2 calendars for Abib and Ziph before we move to Sivan, the 3rd month. And I'd just like you to notice that both of these months are 30-day months. This never happens with a lunar calendar or a Roman calendar. Your Roman calendar on your wall right now today does not have 2 months side by side that have 30 days. You have July and August that both have 31, but not 30. Also, if you use a lunar month with 28 days or 29.5 days, none of this calendar will work out. So only with a 30-day month. So let's take a look.
I think that's
here's month 1.
A pretty good rule to get in our head too, that there's never 230 or a 31 day, that it's always 30.
Straight 30 days.
Yeah.
30, 30, 30, 30, 30.
Just like was already mentioned about Noah and the flood, the calendar starts on the 2nd month and the 17th day, and it goes to the 7th month and the 17th day. So at month number 3, with Enoch calendar, they would normally have an extra day, which would make it 31 days. And at month number 6, which is your 2nd quarter, they would put in another extra day for the 30, 30, 31 pattern.
Right.
When you do that, you end up having 152 days in the count. So the 30-day month is really important. This calendar will not work if you're using anything else but a 30-day month. And it works perfectly with 30 days. So this is just a review.
And I can see too that how for some people that's difficult and challenging, just like it was for you all to be willing to let go of that the first Passover had to be on a Wednesday. As long as you were holding on to that, it would have never had the month start then, because it was all focused on the first Passover being on a Wednesday. And so,
Yeah.
unless we're willing to let go of something, it's very difficult to see anything else.
Yes.
In calendar studies, we had to let go of a lot of things. But it's just amazing how Yahuwah will work with you if you're diligent and you're persistent and you're just downright stubborn, is what I'm going to say. Even though you've got mistakes, he will still work with you, and he'll take you over that ground until you actually see it. Just like with that word congregation there in Exodus 16, congregation, we just didn't see it until it was Tim that saw it. So he will take you back over that ground until you get it, if you're determined to figure it out. And we've probably made every mistake in the book. But here we are. So this is a review. We have Passover on the 14th day. We're still assuming that it's a Tuesday, so we could have our 3 days of travel. We crossed the Red Sea all night long on preparation night, Friday night. At the break of dawn on Sabbath morning, they were delivered from the Egyptians. Day of deliverance and praise and worship. We are still assuming that first fruits followed the weekly Sabbath, and that's when our Omer count starts, right there, number 1. We go the whole week, and we have a full week for our first Omer count. This is the second week, and now we're going to bring in month number 2. Friday and Sabbath finish the count for your second Omer week. We have the children coming into the wilderness of Sin here on the 15th day of the second month. We were told that in the scriptures. Then we were told when they were congregating on the 16th, because they were traveling all day on the preparation day. On the 16th, when they were congregated, is when they had a chance to murmur. And Yahweh said, I will give them flesh to eat in the evening. The quail arrived in the evening, because they were grumbling so much right here. But he said, in the morning there will be bread. That finishes out the 4th perfect week of the Omer count. Then we start our manna right here on the first day, the 17th of this month. They pick manna every single morning for 5 mornings, as much as they need every night. It would spoil if they didn't use it all. But on the 22nd, Moses gave another command. He said, today I want you to gather twice because you need it for Sabbath. So they gathered as much as they needed twice, got their food all ready. They did not pick manna on Sabbath, and it did not stink. That finishes out your 5th Omer week out of the 7. So there's month 1 and 2 before we go into month number 3. We still have a perfect 30-day month, and all of our numbers are still aligning perfectly. Okay.
Very good, very good.
5 complete weeks of the Omer count. We didn't start in the middle of the week, so we've got 5 complete weeks. That's important too. Okay, we're ready to come into Exodus 19 in the 3rd month. This is the chapter that is the icing on the cake. This is the chapter that is going to establish everything with clarity. And this is the chapter that I thank Torah to the tribes for, and the Melchizedek priesthood, because without that information, we would not, probably still wouldn't have this figured out. But this is absolutely beautiful. But I want you to remember, we still have not established with clarity the timing of Passover in the month of Abib. We're still making an assumption. In Exodus 16, it had the second timing clue with the arrival of the manna, and of course the quail as well. And in this 3rd month, we're going to be completing the count for the Omer weeks, and we want to find 7 completed weeks before Pentecost. So next, This is going to be a really fun investigation. We're going to be looking for the exact day and the exact date. Was it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Was it the first, second, third? What is the day and the date of Israel's arrival into the wilderness of Sinai? And then we want to know the exact day and the exact date of the 50th day, which is Pentecost. And then from that, we can back up 50 days and declare the dating of first fruits and check it out to see in Abib 1 if we had it right or not. So there's lots of calendar clues in Exodus 19, and it states right in the very first verse that Israel entered the wilderness of Sinai on a very specific day of a third month. This is where it begins to be like a Rubik's Cube puzzle. And that's the question, what day was it? So I hope you're trusting me that you remember that we ended on a Sabbath in month number 2. So we're starting on a Sunday or the first day of the week for the date of the first. We're now ready to take a look. Here's what the verse says in 19:1. In the third month, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, on this day, this is the calendar language, on this day, it would be the same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Let me read it again. In the third month, after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, on this same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. It's calendar language. There are calendar clues in this verse to tell us where to begin our count. So don't forget, we're still searching for those firm dates for Passover and for Pentecost. So verse 1 tells us that Israel entered the wilderness of Sinai on the same day that they departed from Egypt. And we know that was Wednesday, Abib 15. It was the morning after Passover. So we only have two options here. Our option is either Zif 15, because they left on the 15th day of the first month, the day after Passover. We have that day as an option, or we have Wednesday. We've got 4 Wednesdays here in month number 3 that we can choose from. So which is it going to be? We'll look for the calendar clues. Is that clear? Okay, it's going to get fun. I'm giving you the Omer count here. I've added that in. This box over here is just for comment. We're entering the wilderness of Sinai. There's your verse in case you didn't remember. In the third month, after the children of Israel had come up out of the land of Egypt on this day. So it was either a Wednesday or it was either the 15th. That is when they entered the wilderness of Sinai. And if you're doing your math really quick, you already know what the answer is. The Omer count for the first day of Sivan is number 43 out of the 50. And because Pentecost is on the 50th day, we can automatically eliminate Sivan 15 as one of the choices for when Israel entered the wilderness of Sinai, because Sivan 15 is not before Pentecost, and it is not a Wednesday, because that's what it said, on the same day. So this date gets knocked out. It doesn't work. So let's choose Wednesday, Sivan 4, as the day and the date. The day, Wednesday, or the 4th cycle, the date is the 4th, as the day and the date that Israel entered the wilderness of Sinai. But keep in mind, they're not at the foot of Mount Sinai yet. They've just come into the wilderness. So we're going to choose that day, because this one, the 15th, does not work. Is that clear?
Very.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. I think there's a verse that says regarding unleavened bread that it's from the 15th to the 21st. You know, he actually gave a numerical date. And the same with Passover, a numerical date. And the same with when we arrived in the second month, it was on a date, but now here it's day instead of date.
Yeah.
That's-
Exodus 19. Exodus 19 is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. So we're going to now move from the wilderness to the foot of the Mount Sinai on the 5th day of the month. It will be found in Exodus 19:2, and we're on Omer count number 47. This is what it reads. For they were departed from Rephidim, and they were come to the desert of Sinai, and they pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. This is where you start paying attention to detail. Right there. Then Moses has a command to come up the mountain. It says in verse 3, and Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahuwah called him to him from the mountain. So he makes a trip up the mountain. This is his first encounter at Mount Sinai. Oh, pardon me. His first encounter at Mount Sinai is at the burning bush. I don't believe that was up in the mountain, but he was there at Mount Sinai. So this encounter in Exodus 19 is a trip up the mountain. And Yahuwah is giving instructions to Moses for Israel to prepare for some great events in a few days. So right here, we have a command, come up the mountain on the 5th day of the month. But once Moses is up the mountain, he has to come back down the mountain. He gets Yahuwah's covenant proposal to give to the people, and that's what it says in verse 7. And Moshe came and called. He would have had to come down from the mountain. He came down and he called for the elders of the people, and he set before them all these words which Yahuwah had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahuwah has spoken we will do. So he went up the mountain. He got the assignment from Yahuwah. He comes back down the mountain, gives the words to the people. That happened on Thursday, the 5th of the month, day number 47 of the Omer count. Now we're moving ahead to the next verse. He got the message from the people. It says, so Moses brought back the words of the people. That means he had to go back up the mountain right there. On the next day, he went back up the mountain to give the words of the people to Yahuwah. Then it says in verses 10 and 11, and Yahuwah said to Moses, go to the people and set them apart today and tomorrow, and they need to wash their garments, and they shall be prepared for the 3rd day. That's this one right here. For on the 3rd day, which is the 8th of the month, Yahuwah will come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people. Lots of calendar language here. 3 clues are given on the 6th day. It's preparation day. The clues are today, tomorrow, and the 3rd day. So that's why I say we have to learn to count to 3.
Okay.
In calendar, you have to learn to count, and you have to know how to count 1 to 3, for sure. So Moses has the message.
You want to say something, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah, some people want to say that there's no way that Yahuwah could tell them to do or to do their laundry on Sabbath. I've heard this numerous times. Well, I believe they did their laundry, their physical laundry on preparation day, and I believe they did their spiritual laundry on Shabbat.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And you would
Exactly.
You would hope by now, after the manna deal, that they would know better than to be doing anything less.
Yes, that's true, but you know what? Yahuwah doesn't make any, he knows the end from the beginning, but he gave them the message a couple of times to make sure that they had it right. And we don't have everything in this study on the PowerPoint, but he made sure, and I think he asked them 3 times, are you guys sure that you know that you do not pass the boundaries of this mountain, or else your cattle are going to die, you are going to die. You make sure nobody goes past that boundary. Because he said, I mean what I say. If you do, you're dead meat. That's basically the way it was going to be. So there was no fooling around. Yahuwah made sure that they understood these commands. Yeah. So Moses was up there giving the words to Yahuwah, and he got words to give to them back. So he comes back down in verse 14. He's coming back down the mountain. This is on preparation day. He went down from the mount onto the people, and he sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. That's what it says. And then he said unto the people, be ready against the third day. Come not at your wives. There's the third day, right here. That's the big day. So tomorrow is the Sabbath. This was today, the 6th of the month. Tomorrow is the Sabbath, and that completes your perfect count for the 7 Omer weeks. We've got our 7 weeks. 7 times 7 is 49. We just need one more day.
Yeah.
Sabbath. We made it. We're there.
Charlene, are you working with Charlene? Are you working with a raw PowerPoint?
Yes.
Can you go to the last slide and go up to the top right-hand corner and correct the name of Yahuwah? I wouldn't interrupt it, but since this is going on, posting, we should correct.
Oh, sorry. I'll do it later. Everybody, Yahuwah is spelled wrong on slide 42. That was a typing mistake. That's okay. We have to correct those too, so that will be corrected. I'll have to send out a new PDF for you just after I said it was all done.
Sorry.
So on the tomorrow, that's okay. So on the tomorrow Sabbath, which is Sivan 7, the people rest and worship. That's right here. And this is the 7th week of our Omer count is now complete, 7 complete weeks. It's the 49th day, but the 3rd day is very special. Very special.
Very, very special.
I have never seen any feast group or any of my feast teachers. Been a feast keeper since 2006 was our first Passover. And I was taught that Exodus 19 Pentecost at Mount Sinai, that it was Pentecost because it says the 3rd month. Nobody ever proved it to me. They all just made an assumption. I am learning not to make those assumptions. Nobody's proven it. This study proves that that was Pentecost. That's really exciting.
And to make this, not make it work, I mean it does work, we have to recognize when dawn is, and that dawn is the beginning of a new day. We need to recognize that when he says tomorrow, he means tomorrow, not tonight, and small little things like that. And then it works, it fits, it matches, it lines up, and it tells me what I have to do. What do I do now?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a rough choice when everybody in the community wants to be doing what we've been headstrong about doing for, however long.
One thing that I can say is that one of our favorite feast teachers over the years had challenged us. She challenges all of her students to challenge your belief system to see if it's right. That is hard to do. But when this calendar study came along, we had to challenge to the very core everything we had been taught about the worship statutes when they begin, how to count out the annual Sabbaths. That is a very difficult, when you have to challenge your own belief system, that is difficult, but it will be a learning experience and you will never forget it. We came to the point where we realized sunset was wrong. I don't know about Tim, I can't remember what he told me, but for us to let go of sunset, even though we knew the truth, it took us about 21 months to say, you know what, sunset is wrong, dawn is right, why are we doing this? You know, keeping Sabbath from sunset Friday to dawn Sunday morning. It took that long for that challenge to take root in our mind and run a new paradigm shift in the brain. But I'll tell you what, we were watching the moon, you know, to tell the month. When we discovered that the moon has nothing to do with the month, well, that went out the window right away. It didn't take any time for us to accept that challenge. So once you begin to speak, yeah.
You know,
yes, praise.
Another thing that's real challenging for a lot of folks is that you know, Yahuwah calls us through whatever means He chooses to call us through, and sometimes even though we might say, well, but here's the thing: it's this Sabbath thing is what brought me in, and this is what I know and what saved me, and so therefore I'm not changing a thing. Well, you know, because you know, that's really a sad thing to do, is be presumptuous, like with what are the names, Ahab and Abihu, or I'm not sure how to, you know, they presume. What's the name? How do you say it again?
I just say it the normal way I was taught, Nadab and Abihu, but it's probably wrong.
Yeah, you know, they presumed that it was okay to do it their way. You know, to do something their way, and yeah, brought them in, but we can't just, you know, once He reveals it to us, then we have to be willing to make those, you know, changes, and it's especially difficult. My point being that it's difficult when He may have even used that very thing to bring you in, and He's just an amazing Elohim. I mean, He's amazing that He can use anything, even donkeys like me. So
the other thing that we're learning, we've learned this anyway, is that when Yahuwah gives a command and you understand the command, but you don't want to change because you'll be rejected by your friends, or you're going to be disfellowshipped from your church, or who knows what's going to happen, consequences will be at the door, because He makes it very, very clear that when He has given a command and it has been brought to you to study out, and you study it out and you see that it is right, friends, I really want to say that if you turn your back from it, or if you take your hand off the plow, there are consequences to pay. We learned that here with Moses. He told the Pharaoh, if we don't do this and go and sacrifice to our Elohim, we're going to have to take the consequences. We are not going to do that. We don't care what you say or what you're going to do to us. We don't want to take the consequences of Yahuwah, because that's going to be bad news. So it's a lesson for us here in this study that when Yahuwah gives us commands and they are clear and they are complete, they're understandable, then our obligation, if we want to walk in His steps, are to say, yes, that's what we're going to do.
Yes.
Maybe the first time is hard, and He understands that. And I think probably that some of us go through a hard time because we need to fully understand in ourselves what other people go through when they wrestle with these big decisions. That Tim and I have Sabbath keeping in our roots for 5 generations. So it's rooted pretty deep. So we understand what this transition means. It's not hard. It's not easy. It's hard. We're here to support people. But we're almost done. Should we keep going?
Yes.
Yahuwah's covenant instructions.
Let's confirm this, you know, back to this first fruit thing, because that's what, you know, initiating that phone call to get some first fruit understanding is what kind of opened my door with you. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about this next part.
Okay, First Fruits is a really important festival, and we don't hear a lot of people making, or a lot of feast teachers really emphasizing it, and that'll be in the Joshua study. But here's Yahuwah's covenant instructions for the count from First Fruits to Pentecost. It was given in Leviticus. It says, "And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath," that is the 7676, "from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Then unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath you shall number 50 days. Also, I'd just like to mention here that this command for First Fruits was given for them to honor when they came into the land. They were not given this command to honor First Fruits in the wilderness or in the desert. First of all, there wouldn't have been any barley because they had manna to eat. If there was barley, they probably would have been eating that. Don't forget, the barley was destroyed in Egypt with the plagues. So the command to honor First Fruits was when you come into the land. That's in another study in the Joshua one as well. And even though these instructions were written after Exodus 19, they are a part of Yahuwah's principles for the 50-day Omer count from the beginning, because he doesn't change, he doesn't tell a lie, he doesn't mix it up so that you don't understand it. This is a principle. Because First Fruits,
I was just going to say all the way to the New Testament, the same day, same count, same, yeah, all the way through. Sorry.
How about all the way to the end?
All the way
to the end of the 6,000 years.
Yeah. Right.
All the way. Because First Fruits follows the weekly Sabbath, and that is a Hebrew number 7676, Pentecost will also follow the weekly Sabbath. 50 days later, it is a 7676. We do a lot of work on that in the Joshua account. So let's look at this. We finish our Omer count with the 50th day. And it came to pass on the 3rd day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet was exceedingly loud, so that all the people that were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with Yahuwah on the 3rd day. That's the 50th day of the Omer count to Pentecost. And they stood at the nether part of the mount. So there you had.
This is the 3rd day from when they were told, wash your clothes today and tomorrow, and then that 3rd day.
That's right. So what happened was they entered the wilderness of Sinai on the 4th. Remember, we had to figure out this puzzle. Was it this day or the 15th? It was this day, Wednesday, the 4th day of the week. Then the next day, they ended up at the base of Mount Sinai. They had some traveling to do between the 4th and the 5th. Moses went up the mountain and he came back down with instructions. Yes, the people said that they would obey the covenant. He took the words back up to Yahuwah on the 6th of Sivan. That was a preparation day. That's where he got the instructions from Yahuwah that today and tomorrow and the 3rd day, Moses brings back down the instructions on the 6th. He says, today you wash your clothes and get ready, and then tomorrow and be ready for the 3rd day. There's your Pentecost right there, the 50th day. It's a Kodesh, holy convocation. They were congregating that day, listening. Okay. We've completed this part of the study, so now let's see if we can really determine the days and the dates for Passover, First Fruits, Manna Week, and Pentecost. This is where we're going to see if our assumptions were right or not. Is it really true? And I just put an interesting note here for this particular year. We're doing this in the year of 2017, November 2017. Very interesting note that on the 2018 Covenant Feast Calendar, what we just saw here with the Tuesday Passover and all these dates, it's identical in the 2018 feast calendar. Absolutely identical.
So exciting.
So that's really exciting to, you know, come up to the Passover festival, because this is really going to be an enaction of exactly what happened between Exodus 12, 16, and 19. It's really exciting. Okay, so we'll do the review here. We've done it once before. We said that New Year's Day had to be on the Wednesday, the middle day of the week. That will put Passover on a Tuesday. That leaves you 3 days of travel. There you cross the Red Sea at the night of the 17th. You are on the other side of the Red Sea at the dawn of Sabbath. The Red Sea closes on Pharaoh. We're saying that this is first fruits, the day following the 7-6-7-6 Sabbath. We start our Omer count. We have our first full complete week of our Omer count there. We finish our second complete week of our Omer count right here. We end up coming into the wilderness of Sin on the same day of the month that they left up here on unleavened bread. It was the same day, not day, but the date. They stop for Sabbath. They're clamoring for the quail. Yahuwah promises them quail in the evening right here on the 16th. He says on the morrow, the next day, you will have bread. Manna comes on the 17th day of the second month. There you have your manna week. From Sunday to Thursday, they gather every single morning. On the 22nd, Moses gives them another command. It's the preparation day. He says, today you gather twice as much because you're getting ready for the Sabbath. The manna will keep. That ends our 5th week for the Omer count. We have the 6th week down here. Month number 2 finishes the 30th day on the Sabbath. We'll go to the next calendar, where this is our month number 2. We just did that, just so that you can see that we're still on track here. We'll add month number 3. The first day of the week is the first date of the month. They travel. They come into the wilderness of Sinai on Wednesday the 4th. Remember, it was the same date as they left Egypt again. Very interesting calendar language. It's a puzzle. They travel to the base of Mount Sinai for the 5th, Thursday the 5th. Moses goes up the mountain, gets instructions, and comes back down the mountain, gets the people's answer. Everything that Yahweh is offering them in the covenant, they will do. He takes the words back up the mountain. This is his trip number 3. On Friday, the preparation day, the 6th. That's where he gets the instructions. Be ready today, tomorrow, and the 3rd day. Today, you get all your food ready, you wash your clothes, you worship on Sabbath, be ready for the 3rd day. Because on the 3rd day, Sivan 8 is Pentecost, and that was when he gave the covenant from Mount Sinai. We've completed 7 perfect Omer count right there. 7 times 7 is 49. And here you have your 50th day. So it's no longer an assumption. Passover was on a Tuesday in the first month.
Crazy.
Mario, when this first worked out like this, I think I did the exact same thing you did, only about 10 times more. I was excited.
You know, it's so exciting. And, you know, I just saw something else this time as we went through that you know, that very first Omer day, that very first fruits that they didn't do because they weren't commanded to do it yet, because they weren't in the land. Yet they were still back there, and you know, Egypt, or just crossed over. And so there are things that Yahuwah brings us through that are in us that he hadn't revealed to us yet. It was like he knew where he'd be taking it to, but we just said, yes, whatever, let's just go and let's just go, and so we don't even know what he has in store for us, It was just like, he's so amazing. And what's even truly amazing to me is that he's connecting me with people like yourselves, people that are willing to study, people that are willing to sacrifice what they know for something more. And thank you very, very, very much.
You're welcome. And I think I'll just mention here, we didn't do the slides in this PowerPoint, but if first fruits was on Abib 16 right here, because there is a lot of feast keepers in the Messianic congregations and Hebrew roots, even in feast keepers that we know of, that have come on the journey with us, are placing first fruits right here on the day after the unleavened bread Sabbath. They always have it on the 16th of the month. If you do the count, now that you've got the calendar, if you do the count, you will not get Pentecost on the 50th day where it is in the calendar. It won't work. It only works here. Even though they didn't celebrate it, it wasn't commanded and it wasn't mentioned. First fruits was here. If they would have celebrated it with barley, the first fruits would have been there, and Pentecost would be perfect with Exodus 19. But when you move first fruits up to the 16th of Abib, it will not work.
Yeah.
Puzzle doesn't work.
I raised my hand not to ask a question, but to confess that I was guilty of that. I mean, I loved my mishpachah, my family. They were doing it correctly, doing it on the Passover, on the Sabbath after the weekly Passover, and I had this bent idea, and I was sticking to it, that I was going to do unleavened bread first, and then the Sabbath after unleavened bread. And so it got to a point where I said, well, I'm going to just keep it quiet, and I'll do everything twice, because it puts your feast days different. So we would, that's basically what we did, and so it caused more weight on my family, on me, and I am just extremely grateful that that I'm going to be doing it this year at the same time as everybody. It's in our family, without anything in the back of my mind, and so.
Yes, and I would like to say something too. Wait until you see the Joshua study. When you see the Joshua study, you will be so amazed, surprised. You will be so humbled to find out what happens with first fruits in that study. But there's even more than that. You will find out why first fruits is so important that none of us are taught. Not me anyway. Nobody really, the first fruits comes and goes and nobody says anything at the feast camps. And I was at one camp where I said, it's first fruits today. Nobody said anything. Nobody knows what to do with first fruits. When you know what first fruits is about and why it has to be on this first day of the week, which we call Sunday on this calendar, why first fruits has to be here, and I'm not going to tell you. When you find out what Joshua has to say about this, you're going to be so excited. That study is going to cement this one. So everything in Yahuwah's calendar, it starts linking together. Every puzzle piece starts to slate in a perfect spot. It's not where you have to force it in. So it really gets to be fun. And then you will know, Mario, that you have the right day.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the first witness.
Yeah. I think I know now.
But anyway.
I'm going to take this witness for sure. But while we're still recording, I was wondering if you might share, say that you're new, you've never done these feast days before, ever, and we have the instruction that our feast day starts from Passover on the 14th is Passover, and then unleavened bread on the 15th to the 21st day at even also. and then you come up to first fruits. What would be an appropriate way in this day, in this time, under the Melchizedek order, to do first fruits? Any suggestion?
Tim?
I'm a little unsure of the question just yet.
Is there an
He's just like for Sukkot or tabernacles. You know, we build a Sukkot, and there's some special things that we do. What we have been doing in our feast camp, because we keep the full 8-day festival, we remember what first fruits is all about. I'm not going to tell you. Maybe we'll have to save the question for when we do Joshua. But we're just massaging the word and doing lots of studies on first fruits like we do any other day, because we have a full 8 days of fellowship and feasting on studies, feasting on food. So it's just remembering what first fruits is all about, and I don't want to spill the beans yet.
Okay.
So I'll keep you in suspense until we do Joshua.
Yeah, I think
We
go ahead.
We do try to make emphasis on first fruits and make specific study on that day so that it is recognized as extremely, extremely important.
Yeah.
Tim, I have one more slide. Do you want to go through it? It's just a summary of what we've done.
Sure. Facts for the calendar count from Exodus 12, Passover, to Exodus 19, Pentecost. Number 1, the timing for Sivan 8th, the day of Pentecost, is perfect. Number 2, we can now work the calendar timing from Passover forward or from Pentecost backwards to establish the exact day of the week and dates of the month for all the important events from Exodus 12 to Exodus 19. Number 3, Passover on Abib 14 must be on a Tuesday to allow for 3 days travel before the Sabbath.
Now, must have been according to our observations, right? It doesn't have to be on Passover. Doesn't have to be on Tuesday every year. Correct?
Correct.
No,
Correct.
that is just for this year. That for the year of Exodus 12, for that year only, because Passover in Joshua actually is going to be on a weekly Sabbath. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Number 4, fact. The proper placement of first fruits is on Abib 19, the day following the weekly Sabbath in the week of the spring festival. There is also a very strong witness in the Joshua study for the exact and proper placement of first fruits every year. Number 5, first fruits begins the 50-day count towards Pentecost, which must also be placed on the day following the weekly Sabbath, and that's H7676.
You have that memorized?
Yeah.
Long time. Number 6, Exodus 16 tells us the exact day and date of the arrival of the quail and the first 6 days of the manna week. Indeed, the manna is gathered for a full 6 days, verifying the lesson, gather 5 days and double on the 6th day, and no gathering on the Shabbat. Number 7, Exodus 19 gave us several clues as to exactly when Israel entered the wilderness of Sinai and when they arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai. The very specific clues that were given to Moshe on his trips up Mount Sinai were A, today and tomorrow and the third day. Be ready for the third day. B, the third day was Pentecost. Yeah. Full scriptural alignment. The calendar study is complete and perfect. And this is only one installation. I can hardly wait for Joshua study to come online. I really can. That, to me, is one of my favorite studies. It is so powerful. It just shakes my shoes every time I read it.
Great.
I look forward to it.
I look forward to it as well. And if anyone has any other questions, okay, there we go. You just answered it for me. Very good.
I just want to thank Mario for taking your time to do this for your friends at Torah to the Tribe. And I'd like to thank Torah to the Tribe for having us as part of their family. We feel at home here. And if there's anything that we can do to work together, for the benefit of everybody around the world, that would just bring us the greatest joy. Thank you very much.
Amen and amen. Well, I'd like to end with the word of prayer, if that's okay. I know that you have things to do as well, and so if I could, I'd be honored to do that.
Okay.
And you can feel free to add to it either, or however you want to do that. But, Father, I thank you for your word that is alive and full of power. And I thank you for revealing your calendar, your time to us. It is just a verification and a proof that you are on the throne and you know when to begin and when we're ready and what we need to do to get ready. And Father, I pray that each and every one of us would wash our clothes and prepare and expect to meet you on the third day. Especially now in these last days. B'Shem Melchizedek Yehusha.
Father, I would like to give as much thanks as I possibly can for this opportunity being given to Charlene and I to present what we have worked on for many years. Thank you, Father, for this opportunity. Thank you, Mario, for facilitating this. And thank you, Torah to the Tribes and Matthew Nolan, for allowing this to be. Thank you, thank you.
And Father, I also want to add my word of thanks, and I just pray that all of those that will have a chance to take the time to go through this uploaded video presentation, that you would give them eyesight for their eyes, that you would open their ears to hear and understand, and that they would come to the point where they have the joy that we have of knowing that they are entering an opportunity to be in Yahuwah's elegant calendar, a blood-ratified covenant calendar that is so special that it is found in those very special pages between Genesis 1 and Exodus 24:11. Father, that there is no other calendar that can compete with the very strict and tight requirements that you have laid down so simply. We are just honored and blessed that you would have taken the time over all these years to guide and direct us, to find all of these little clues, and to be able to share it with others. Father, we give you all the honor, the glory, and the praise. I just ask, Father, that if there's anything wrong that we have anywhere along the line, because we've done a lot of studies, that you would bring it to our attention. And I know that you will, because you are faithful to your word. We thank you for Yahusha, your son, who has paid the price on the cross so that we would not have to go through with the death penalty, that we can have life forevermore. And we just ask, Father, that for every day that you give us, may we always bring the praise and the honor back to you. We thank you in Yahusha's name. Amen.
Amen. Amen and amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very, 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 very much. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.
Okay.